I can honestly say that I have not seen any new ads in terms of smoke Newports or Marlboros the way you would have seen like back in the 70s. A lot of that advertising has been banned now because you had the Marlboro man who was riding the horse and he made smoking look sexy. So what does that say? It says any man who rides a horse with a cowboy hat and smokes a cigarette can more than likely get any woman that he wants. And so the message is not, it's not as subliminal as a lot of people think. It's quite blatant. And the bottom line is, or the line drawing factor is, whether or not you're going to feed into it. Whether or not you're going to be a sucker for advertising or whether you're going to walk away from it. And what are those reasons behind you making those decisions? Does it mean that you have to always walk away from advertising? No, it just means that you're making a conscious decision as to where you want to spend your money, where you want to be health conscious, where you want to vacation. And it follows with every line of thinking, every decision that we make on a daily basis. And so this is just another one of those decisions that we make on a daily basis. Are we going to smoke or are we not? And so, yes, the media, the short side of it is that, yes, the media does play a big role. Why? Because you have cigarette companies who are paying money for advertising. It's business. They have to get customers in order to keep their businesses alive. And it's just that simple. Now, again, for the shows that I watch, I don't see it in excess. And when there is smoking, it is acknowledged. I don't watch a lot of reality TV. I would imagine that with some of the reality shows, you might see it a little bit more because that's a little closer to real life, even though reality TV has a basic script. But you will see more natural habits that will occur on reality TV shows versus something scripted, something like a sitcom like Modern Family or something like that.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the panel like to talk about the media? How you feel like the media attracts a certain population or makes it more sexier?
I mean, I absolutely agree with what she just said. I was flipping through the magazine the other day and I saw Justin Timberlake in the title in big bold letters saying, Justin Timberlake, how he made vaping sexy. And they have like a whole 2-page article on this. And I'm like, why? Why are you publicizing this and making this seem glamorous and having people believe that this is what you're supposed to do? So the media does play a very, very big part in influencing people to do things. So I absolutely do agree with what she's saying.
And I'll just add, I've seen advertisements that are basically directly imitating the classic Marlboro Man and others from the 1950s and 60s. And it's like the same thing all over again. They're actually recreating them. They look shockingly similar, but with e-cigarettes and vaporizers. So it's like we are back, we've seen this decades ago, and now we're sort of seeing the same exact tactics. It's kind of shocking that they're not even trying to be that much more innovative. They are very, very similar to what we saw a whole, generation ago.
And all that is really is, this is a formula that used to work. Let's do it again, and let's just update it. It's just like a conversation that I had with my students the other day in regards to film remakes. Well, you get a film remake roughly every 25 years. Why? Because that's the course of a generation, every 25 years. So whereas, for example, The Manchurian Candidate, the original with Frank Sinatra, he was a Korean war vet. In the remake, it was Denzel Washington, and he was an Iraqi war vet. Yeah. So all you're doing is using the same formula. We know that this works, and now we're just going to update it with new information or new things that have happened, and now it's vaping. And so vaping is trying to be made sexy the way smoking was made sexy in the 50s and 60s, yep. And we're using the new product.
So thank you so much. I would like to go to one of the next questions from one of our students, and it relates also to the media. So the student had this question of, with the new Black Lives Matter movement, why is it so important for African Americans to reduce their tobacco use? So I think they were trying to correlate the deaths that are happening in the Black Lives Matter movement and really trying to say, well, people are doing self-harm with tobacco. Is there a relationship? Why are people being sucked in, even though we've had this conversation for many years that, like Marlina said, that tobacco is bad, and people are still going back to it? I'm trying my best to interpret the question, but I thought it was a very timely question from some of our students who are thinking in a political arena about how big tobacco truly is trying to infiltrate communities, and particularly communities of color. Would any of you like to enlighten us on your thoughts of this question?
I'd have to say that when I first saw the question, I had to think about it. And the interpretation, as you said, Dr. Montecalvo, is I was wondering, okay, which angle can we approach this from? So Black Lives Matter, as we know, is really about police violence
Right.
against unarmed drivers, unarmed citizens who happen to be African American and predominantly male. And we know that this is a phenomenon. We see the YouTube videos, we see the videos on the news and so forth. And so the correlation that I felt might be appropriate, I immediately thought of Eric Garner. And so Eric Garner was selling loosies. And what we know loosies are loose cigarettes. So somebody will buy a pack of cigarettes and they'll sell you loosies. So they'll sell you individual cigarettes on the corner, okay? This is technically illegal, but it's a phenomenon that happens a lot of times because cigarettes are now $13 a pack, I think you said? $13 a pack. Or more, okay? So if you have someone who just came from another state, let's say North Carolina or Virginia, where cigarettes are way cheaper, and then they bring them up here to New York to sell them, well, then they're going to make money if they have the clientele. It's basic economics, supply and demand. And so Black Lives Matter in terms of how we look at socioeconomic situations where somebody like Eric Garner, to my recollection, had a college degree, but because of his asthma was unable to hold a regular 9-to-5 job, so to speak. And so he took to selling loosies to support his family amongst his other endeavors. So making the connection is a little hard, but it is simple. And the simple matter is, why is it that that cigarettes are often oversold in communities of color? Well, ironically, when I worked for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, now granted this was some years ago, this was 2008, the highest rate of smokers in the United States was amongst Asian men. So Asians, yes, are people of color. I'm pretty sure that the student was probably talking about African American men, but the highest rate of smoking percentages actually belong to Asian men. And if I'm not mistaken, right behind that, it was Latino men and then African American men. Okay, so by the numbers, even though those numbers are a little bit old, but going off of that notion, you have to say, well, what's the attraction? Why is it that Asian men? Why is it that Latino men? Why is it that African American men turn to smoking? Well, we know that smoking is a form of release. Not everybody's a drinker. Not everybody's a shopper. I'm a shopper. Okay, not everybody. Not everyone has their own form of release. And sometimes those releases are dangerous. Shopping can be dangerous. If you don't have the money to support your bad shoe habit, shopping can become dangerous. Okay? Will it kill you? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Okay? Smoking, we know, can, in a lot of cases, kill you. And so if we want to turn it to Black Lives Matter, then we have to look at the basic supply and demand. So if you have a high rate of stores that are selling cigarettes legally in a community at the corner store, who is the demographic in that community, first and foremost, and how many packs of cigarettes are they selling on a regular basis? Okay, even my local Walgreens sells cigarettes. CVS, I believe, has stopped selling cigarettes. But Walgreens still sells cigarettes, but you have to have photo ID, like state driver's license. And they also take your picture. There's a hidden camera in the Walgreens by my house where they take your picture. You're on camera while you're buying cigarettes. So they want to make sure that you are of age while you're buying cigarettes. So that's the best way that I can connect it for you. Again, by the numbers, the Asian population, Asian men specifically, are the highest smokers. And I don't know if that number has changed. I don't know if you've seen recent data, Julia, in regards to the demographic of smokers.
I haven't seen specific numbers breaking it down along those lines, but I mean, it's no secret that big tobacco targets communities of color, and they've done this for a long, long time. I just had the privilege of hearing a woman who's very well known in this world speak, named Tanisha Wright, and she actually used to work for Big Tobacco, and she knows all the insider information on their practices and how they specifically target certain communities, and putting in retailers, but also advertising. And so we need to do more to raise awareness around these corrupt practices. I mean, everyone knows that big tobacco is bad, but a lot of people don't know exactly what they're doing in targeting these specific communities. And that's something we need to raise awareness around, and try to perhaps push for legislation that would prevent these communities from being targeted. That's my perspective.
Julia, do you mind talking to the audience about some of the videos we showed when we were warming up the audience from your...
Yeah, of course. So this summer we had some high school fellows work with us, and we had them create videos through a program called Powtoons, and they're animated videos. We sort of started by having them look at their own neighborhoods, and we had them on Google Maps sort of map out all the tobacco retailers that they had within a certain block radius of their home. And then they sort of thought about what that meant. Like, on my 8-block walk from my house to school, I passed by 6 tobacco retailers. And maybe they didn't notice that before, but we had them sort of really reflect on what that meant for their neighborhood. And what could you see in place of tobacco retailers? Wouldn't it be nice that instead of a tobacco retailer, I had a healthy food store, or maybe a bookstore, or a basketball court? And so we have sort of a hashtag Not More Tobacco campaign going on that's, in Bed-Stuy, I want more florists, hashtag Not More Tobacco. And so these students created short animated videos reflecting what they see in their own neighborhoods. And they're really pretty impressive, I think. And they've gotten actually the attention of people around the country. The California Department of Health has sent them around, and they're really looking at them as like a pretty innovative way to engage with younger people, which has been a challenge of ours so far. So they're pretty cool.
So I have them open, and I know some people are just coming in from a class, and I would like to just show 1 or 2 of them because I think they are quite wonderful. So.
And it's nice also because it really localizes the problem.
So this is one of your fellows' created videos, and there are several more, and they're very wonderfully done to truly illustrate what tobacco is doing in particular communities. One of the questions that a student had also asked was, how can you talk to college students? How can you reach that young population in addressing tobacco education? So I'd like to ask Marlina, since she fits that demographic perfectly, her thoughts on that, particularly since she's been working so diligently on a pledging program for No Smoke November, which I believe you are also doing the raffle after the session today?
Yes.
Perfect. So please share with us some of the thoughts in exposing and truly educating this population.
Okay. In terms of reaching the college students on smoking, it really starts with them wanting to change. You can show people information and show them all the adverse reactions that you can have from smoking tobacco, vaping, all these things. But if they don't want to change, it will be very, very hard. But there are people who do want to change, but they don't know that there are programs out there to help you to stop smoking. So a lot of people, they're like, oh, if I stop smoking, I'm going to go through withdrawal. That may be true, but that doesn't mean when you have to stop smoking that you're going to go cold turkey. That means that, you know, you're going to stop smoking and you're not going to pick up another cigarette. But you can try to do a little bit better. You can wean down on smoking. There's smoking cessation programs all over New York that are here to help you and to educate you and actually provide support if you would like to stop smoking. So during this No Smoke November campaign, I've been receiving mixed reviews. Some people are like, I know, but I'm not going to smoke. Then there are some people that said, thank you for starting this, because now I have a reason, or I have an objective to go towards. So this was a very interesting experience. I enjoyed this, and I hope I get to do this again next year.
So No Smoke November was an initiative that started last year from student government here on campus, where it was offering the opportunity for students to truly have an entire month instead of one day. Like the Great American Smokeout is about one day, 24 hours. What we're trying to do is offer information for an entire month. And there's always information on campus. We have a wonderful school nurse who has joined us, and we're very grateful to have her. And she does offer opportunities for cessation at all times. But there's also this issue of, where do students go? How can they make a pledge? How many pledges did you have at the end of today?
Well, Marianne is actually in the front over there. She's actually dividing. But the last time that I actually checked, we had about 30 people who pledged non-smoking for the month of November. So that's a really big amount of number. So that's really good.
And there was a raffle and funds as well?
Oh, so I approached some companies about No Smoke November, and they donated some products to us to give a little bit like of incentive of people, and all proceeds went to St. Jude's Hospital.
And we were able to do a collaboration with the fraternity here on campus. Teak has been a great partner, and we're going to be donating the funds. And I know at last count, you had several hundreds of dollars. We made about 660 the last time that we counted. We're still counting, so at the end of this, we'll know the final count. Over 650?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just during this month?
During this month.
Wow. So did you find that this was a good tool to use to reach the students on this particular campus?
It was a good tool to reach out to the students, because there were some people who really wanted to stop, and then there were some people who were wondering why we were doing this. But I think it was a good way to see where everybody is, where their mindset is.
Okay. Do you want to add anything about reaching the young adult consumer when it comes to tobacco cessation?
Me?
Either one of you.
So Edric is our student engagement coordinator, but I know that he would say that one of the reasons why we work with high school students, and this is, talking about a high school student and not college, but one reason behind our programming is that it's really important for teens and I think also college students to become their own health advocates and to educate their peers, because we've learned not always the most effective for adults to be telling younger people what they should or shouldn't be doing, and so it's really important to find those champions in high schools or colleges who can educate their own peers. That is often much more effective.
Do you want to have anything to add?
I think that when I look at the student population here, as well as having a college-age son who doesn't smoke, I'm happy to say, but I don't pass judgment because I get it in the sense of stress. I realize that a lot of times students and even adults, regardless of the age of the student, you begin to smoke because it's a stress reliever. And just a quick note, Peter Jennings, who has, he died about almost 10 years ago now. Peter Jennings was an anchor for ABC News for many years, and Peter Jennings had quit smoking. And on September 11th, 2001, when our country was attacked, when New York City was attacked, Peter started smoking again. And so when he started smoking again, that was it. That was when cancer invaded his lungs, and when he was diagnosed at stage 4. And unfortunately, he lost his life. And so when I look at stress-related situations like that, I often say to myself, well, there are a lot of things that we can do to alleviate stress, and I wonder what outlets our students have here to help them, because you can't just say, like you said, you can't just say quit smoking, and the redundancy of it, we sound like that old grandmother that says, you shouldn't be doing blah, 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 blah. And even though you might want to quit, sometimes it is hard. And so again, where is that stress reliever? What can we offer our students in place of that cigarette when they've had that bad day, when they don't get the grade that they work so hard for, when things might actually be bad at home, and then sometimes it might bleed over into their schoolwork, and it manifests, unfortunately, again, in bad grades or low attendance. And all of these things are stress factors. And so I find that from my observation and from my experience, having worked in news for so many years, which is beyond stressful, that I worked with a lot of smokers. In between breaks, if there was especially a breaking news day, you would go outside and, outside of ABC, I worked for ABC, I worked for Fox, I worked for a number of entities, but there was the smoking section right outside the building, and no matter how cold it was outside, you would have folks who, they wouldn't wear a coat, but they had to get that cigarette in. And so for me, I always correlate smokers to people who are in high stress jobs or who don't know how to otherwise handle their stress. And so I think that we might want to look into going down the road, looking into other things that students can use to relieve their stress that are healthy and by all means that don't cost $15 a pack.
We have several more questions in our questions from students, but we have a robust audience here. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for our panel?
So for No Smoke November, we had a pledge form, and it said, I will either stop smoking or I will do something healthy. So the smokers who said that they don't want to stop smoking, I kind of lured them in. I'm like, okay, you don't want to stop smoking. How about doing something healthy? Do something more. Do something different that will promote health. So that was the reason why I actually didn't want to just limit it to just not smoking, because you want to change. If you want to change, you will change. So if you try to do one thing healthy, it might turn into 2 things. It might turn into 3 things. So it's just that first step. That's the reason. Yeah. We didn't have anything to physically give them because we actually needed a clinician to do that. But I did refer people to different programs saying these programs will support you if this is the road that you want to go to. So it wasn't just like, here, sign this pledge. I referred them to places.
And you also have, if I can jump in, you also have, if you go visit 311, or you call 311 NewYorkCity.com, NewYorkCity.gov, excuse me, to their smoking cessation program, and you sign up with them, they will send you cessation products like the nicotine gum and the nicotine patch. My grandfather, many years ago, quit cold turkey, and my mother quit cold turkey. As I was sharing with one of my students before we began, my mother started smoking in high school when cigarettes were $0.25 a pack. And so her and her friends used to chip in a nickel a piece to buy their cigarettes because it was cool then. And so when cigarettes got to about $1 a pack, she said, I'm not paying $1 a pack for cigarettes. That's ridiculous. And she smoked it took about a pack a week, so she wasn't a heavy smoker. But when cigarettes became over $1 a pack, and then my nieces were born, who were twins, and they were always with us, she didn't want to smoke around them. And so those were her two reasons, and she quit cold turkey. Her biggest fear was that, and what I found with other people also, that they don't want to quit is their weight. So they don't want to quit because the smoking helps keep their weight down. And my mother said, this is going to kill me, but I have to stop smoking. She never had any problems with her lungs, but after she quit, she started, the big cinnamon rolls from the coffee carts. Yeah, they became her friends. So every day she still had her coffee, but she didn't have the cigarette in the coffee. She now had the cinnamon roll in the coffee.
Yeah, I don't think that's fair. And I've actually have friends who've had smoking coworkers, and they've said, all right, well, if you're going out for a smoke break, I'm going out for a 15-minute fresh air break. And they go for a walk because they want to prove a point, and enjoy that same break from work. So no, I think that is problematic. And part of that is normalizing tobacco use, right? If we don't allow these breaks, or at least we don't treat them as normal, then we help denormalize tobacco use, which is our ultimate goal. So I believe, and Edric can confirm this with me, but I believe they looked at just tobacco retailers were registered as tobacco retailers with the Department of Health. And so we were given a list, and they went and sort of confirmed, and then Google mapped it. So they were just looking at traditional retailers, I believe. But that is something that we're looking at now, is hookah bars and vape shops. There's actually legislation that's out in the city council that would restrict or ban hookah bars from now, from existing, really. It's been a big problem in Bay Ridge, and it's a city council member, Gentili from Bay Ridge, who has proposed this for that reason, because you probably heard about this study. NYU students who sort of went undercover into hookah bars, and they took samples, because of course hookah is supposed to be just the herbal hookah. Otherwise, if it has tobacco in it, it violates the Clean Indoor Air Act, and they took samples, sent it to a lab, and the lab proved that there actually was tobacco in the hookah, so they were violating the law by doing that. So that has created a lot of attention around it, and legislation being proposed to outright ban hookah because it's become so problematic. But they didn't look at those specifically, but it's definitely an area that we're keeping our eye on going forward. Yeah, I've actually asked, we're funded by the state, New York State Bureau of Tobacco Control, and so we have partners doing this work all over New York State. And I've asked them, who's worked with tobacco-free colleges and what has your experience been? And for the most part, it's 100% tobacco-free campuses. I've not heard from anyone who's made any exceptions. It's just 100% or they don't do it. There was an interesting story recently. I was with a colleague in Albany, and he said that they created some type of smoking area. They did it in a really central location, and it ended up being a huge disaster. It was in a very central location, and of course, these are campuses that have like they're not in urban centers like we are, so it's a very different landscape. But there weren't even that many smokers on campus, but because they created it in kind of a very visible area, and these smokers were always there, it was the one place they're allowed to smoke, it made it look as if there were tons of people smoking, and it actually increased the visibility of smoking on campus by having this dedicated area. So they sort of did it in not a very good way by choosing an area that was conveniently located because they wanted to accommodate the smokers. And it actually made the problem worse, and after that, they went completely 100% tobacco-free. We're dealing with a tricky situation here because of having neighbors that are so close, and being in such a dense urban area, it is very tricky. And when I talk about this predicament with my upstate partners, almost no one has advice because they don't have to deal with this particular, problem. It's pretty complicated here. Yeah, of course, and I think we know that there aren't that many smokers on campus. They're just, again, it's pretty visible because most smokers are standing right in front of the building and you see it when you walk in. So there's probably not even, that many on campus. But given our small sort of sidewalk space and entryway, they can create a bigger problem than normal.
And I would like to add, a part of the Clear Passages Committee is we spent a significant amount of time talking to the stakeholders on our campus that included over 500 students. We completed a survey before we move forward with any of the work that we've been doing to truly capture the information of the campus. And I think when you do any work in any population, you must go to the stakeholders. You must go to the individuals that will be impacted. And that's what we did. And the response overwhelmingly was, how can we best have a smoke-free area and an area for individuals to respectfully smoke? And that's the new policy and the new creation we have had here on campus. And I'm hoping this is our first day, and we're hoping that it will be a beautiful transition. And we're looking forward to people coming on board. And I think Brother Greg says it very often, very eloquently. He says, this is a place for individuals to practice the behavior so that when they do transition into their career, that they are prepared to really know their health behaviors. So it aligns with what you're saying, is that so they really truly know what to do when they're going in the workplace. This is the environment to practice, and we're here to support you. I'm not sure if an employer will be as supportive as we're willing to be, and we're willing to use our Franciscan heart. I don't know if an employer is going to have that same organizational mission. And I believe that with Liz, with Brother Greg, with Julia, myself, and everyone else on our team for Clear Passages, we truly want to help individuals. We don't want to penalize individuals for smoking in inappropriate places. We want to work with them so we can reduce the issue of stress. I think that's really what we're hearing resonating, is this issue of stress with college students. How can we truly help them?
And the side note to that is that what if, for example, when I walked up to the campus today, the new benches that we have outside, there were about 3 or 4 smokers lined up. Not one of them did I happen to recognize to be a St. Francis student. So you have a lot of people who are in the neighborhood who, sit and they, it's a nice day, so they're, outside and enjoying the weather. But I just walked through a cloud of smoke. So I'm not a smoker, but I could have picked it up. It could be in my hair, it could be in my clothes. And so while I understand as a potential employer why you might not want to hire a smoker, there are circumstances that sometimes you cannot avoid. I walk through a cloud of smoke every day when I come to work. So, will I get penalized for that? Or, if someone is on the bus next to me who might have been smoking something else, because that rubs off too, am I going to be labeled that type of smoker? So, there are nuances. I think that it's the side note to that is that as an employer, you have to be careful about how you look at potential hires, because not everyone is in that position, meaning not everyone is a smoker. They might happen to live with a smoker, or they might have happened to have been on the bus or in an environment where they were around smokers and they just soaked it up. Cigarette smoke gets into your clothes and into your hair very quickly.
And we're very lucky today. We had Nicotine Anonymous representatives offered a meeting and also offered support. Question about the use of, I'm paraphrasing, please make sure I clarified your question, looking at the use of smoking as detrimental to our environment, not just to human beings, but to the overall environment.
I mean, I believe it for sure, especially, I mean, when you look at cigarette smoke in your own home, people have pets and people have plants. I don't know if there are any botanists in the room, but that can actually do a lot of damage to any living, breathing thing. And so it won't be as concentrated, I think, if it's, in the outdoors, but you look at cigarette butt litter is certainly toxic. And I think this can certainly damage any, organisms or creatures that live in our environment.
And your pets can get ear infections from cigarette smoke. So just like several years ago, I always have a story. There was a good friend of the family who used to smoke around her daughter. And her daughter consistently had ear infections. And she took her daughter to the doctor every time, of course, she had an ear infection. And the doctor told her, she kept asking, well, how is she getting these ear infections? Why can't we stop them? And the doctor told her, she said, well, is she around anyone who smokes? And she said, yeah, I'm a smoker. And she said, well, you have to stop smoking around your daughter because the smoke is causing her ear infections. So lo and behold, what do we find out several years later? That it also affects our pets. So if you have a pet and you're a smoker, your dog or cat can get ear infections from that secondhand smoke as well.
Or worse. There are vets who are seeing, pets with all types of cancers that are from living in an environment with a smoker.